"You okay?" Marcus Williams asked the question softly, his deep voice slicing through the cold December wind. The woman didn't answer at first. She was slouched on a stone bench just outside the towering glass doors of the firm's downtown Chicago office. The night had emptied of its party magic. On were the clinking glasses, the holiday jazz, the polite laughter. What remained was bitter wind, leftover confetti sticking to the sidewalk, and Victoria Reynolds, head of corporate strategy, wrapped in a glittering dress now dull in the low light. Her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't lift her head. Marcus took a step closer. "Victoria, it's freezing. Let me take you home." Still no answer. He crouched beside her, and that's when he saw either mascara was streaked, her breath shallow, her body trembling. She wasn't just drunk. She was utterly alone. There was no driver, no assistant, no friends lingering behind, just Victoria and him. With a quiet sigh, Marcus slipped out of his wool coat and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. "You can't stay out here," he murmured. "You'll get sick." Only then did her eyes flicker open, hazy, confused. "I missed my ride," she said, voice cracked. "They all left." "I'm here," he said simply. She tried to stand but stumbled immediately. Without hesitation, Marcus caught her in his arms. She didn't fight him. Her head rested against his shoulder like a child's. She weighed less than he expected. He carried her to his car, a reliable 10-year-old Ford, and buckled her in. She slumped sideways, mumbling something about being strong too long before falling into a fragile sleep. Marcus looked at her for a moment before starting the engine. "And if this moment moved you, if you believe that compassion still matters in a world that too often looks the other way, then don't just scroll past. Drop a 1 in the comments if you stand with kindness. If you believe in the quiet strength of a black man who chose to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. Like this video if you felt something. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories that remind us what humanity really looks like. Traffic was light. The city was winding down. Snow flurried gently across the windshield as he made his way to the address he'd only once seen a corporate memo announcing her promotion. Her building had a doorman who barely blinked when Marcus carried her in. "Penthouse?" the man asked, pressing the elevator button. No other questions. Upstairs, the apartment was what he expected. Sleek, modern, expensive, but cold. Like a hotel suite dressed in wealth but empty of life. No photos, no books, no clutter. Just polished surfaces and curated art. He laid her gently on the bed, removed her heels, pulled a light throw from the back of the couch and covered her. She stirred once, eyes barely open. "You stayed?" "I wasn't sure you were safe," he said. For a moment, her hand reached for his. Then it dropped. Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed. He didn't mean to sit long. Just a few minutes, he told himself. But as the hours passed, and the city turned to stillness, he remained silent sentinel beside a woman who, hours ago, wouldn't have said 10 words to him. Sometime past 4 a.m., her breathing deepened, her body relaxed. Confident she was resting safely now, Marcus stood. He scribbled a quick note. "You were outside. I brought you home. No harm done, M," and left it on the nightstand. Back in his car, the sky had started to lighten. He drove straight to the south side, where Maya was getting ready for school. She met him at the door in her coat and boots, holding a to-go cup of hot cocoa. "You didn't come home," she said, worried. "I had to help someone," he replied. "You ready?" They walked to the car. The wind was still biting, but in a different way. Marcus glanced back once at the sunrise casting golden streaks over the city skyline. Something had shifted. He didn't yet know that this simple act of compassion-owned moment of staying, when he could have walked away, would change both of their lives. That the storm hadn't passed at all. It had just begun to whisper. The next morning arrived with a sharpness Marcus could feel in his bones. The cold outside matched the weight in his chest. He had dropped Maya off at school, her little hands clutching a foil-wrapped peanut butter sandwich, her curls bouncing as she waved goodbye. Now, the streets of Chicago pulsed with their usual rhythm, indifferent to what had happened hours ago. Marcus pulled into the parking garage beneath the firm's main office. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. No signs of fatigue. At least none that showed. But inside, he hadn't slept. Not really. He had spent the night replaying every detailer on that bench, the heaviness of her in his arms, the flicker of recognition in her eyes when she realized he had stayed. Stepping into the elevator, he nodded at two junior analysts, who barely acknowledged him. That was odd. Usually, they offered a polite, "Good morning, Mr. Williams." The door closed. On the 15th floor, something felt different. The air in the open office was off. Quiet, yes, but not the normal Monday quiet. This was loaded, stiff, the kind of silence people use to measure distance. He approached his cubicle. On his monitor was a calendar notification. 10:30 a.m., HR meeting, conf, room 2B. No subject, no sender, just a red flag blinking in the corner. Marcus stared at it for a moment, jaw tight. By 10:25, he was walking into room 2B. The first person he saw was Jennifer from HR, already seated with a company-issued tablet and a forced smile. The second was Victoria. She was composed, crisp white blouse under a navy blazer, hair pinned back, not a trace of the vulnerable woman from last night. She looked at him once and then looked away. "Marcus," Jennifer began, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Thanks for coming." He sat. "Something I should know about?" Jennifer tapped her screen. "We received an anonymous concern this morning regarding last night's party." Marcus didn't move. "What kind of concern?" Victoria finally spoke. Her voice was low, careful. "It's not an accusation. I woke up this morning unsure of how I got home, and when I realized I'd been brought there by someone from work without remembering, it raised questions. You were outside, alone, in the cold," Marcus said evenly. "I found you on a bench. You couldn't walk. I carried you to my car and drove you home." Jennifer's brows furrowed. "Victoria, is that how you remember it?" I don't remember much," she said. "I remember being cold, and then, nothing." Jennifer's tone stayed gentle. "Marcus, this is an informal check-in, but while we clarify the circumstances, we're going to ask you to take administrative leave. It's not disciplinary, just procedure." He looked from Jennifer to Victoria. Her eyes didn't meet his. "I left a note," Marcus said, "next to your bed." Victoria flinched. Just slightly. Jennifer closed her tablet. "You'll be on paid leave. It will suspend your credentials this afternoon. We just need space to make sure everything's clear." Marcus stood, the air suddenly too heavy to breathe. "Are you serious?" "It's just a precaution." He didn't argue. What was the point? Outside the room, the hallway seemed longer than it had ever been. The Christmas decorations were still up, red bows on cubicle walls, a small artificial tree near reception. They looked like lies now. Back at his desk, Marcus quietly powered down his computer. As he grabbed his coat, his phone vibrated. A text from Amanda, his old college friend who was now a civil rights attorney. "You okay? Saw something weird about you on a firm gossip blog. Call me." Marcus clenched the phone in his hand. He drove home in silence. Maya would be at school until 3:30. The house was still. The framed photo of his father smiling in his postal worker uniform stared back at him from the mantel. He sat down in the armchair and let the weight settle. They didn't ask what happened. They assumed. He looked over at the small lockbox in the hallway closet. He hadn't touched it in years. It held only one thing, a flash drive. Years ago, he had started recording things. Not out of paranoia, but habit. One too many meetings where credit vanished. One too many jokes that crossed lines. He had learned the hard way black men didn't get the benefit of the doubt. He opened the box, inserted the drive into his laptop, scrolled past old folders labeled Q3 Budget Meeting and 2019 Diversity Committee until he found the one from last night. He clicked play. The audio crackled, but her voice was clear. "They all left. Even Tom. I was just sitting there like a damn ornament." Then his own voice. "You okay?" Silence. "I'm just tired of pretending like I belong in their world. They don't want me here either. I'm not drunk. Not really. Just empty." Marcus hit pause. She hadn't remembered saying that, but he had the proof she did, that she was coherent, vulnerable, real. But would it matter? He sat back and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just about protecting himself anymore. Something deeper had been cracked open. Somewhere between the glittering company gala and that silent elevator ride, a line had been crossed, and not in the way they thought. This wasn't a scandal. It was something far more dangerous. It was the truth. and the cost of it had just begun. The afternoon passed in a blur. Marcus stayed home, pacing. He reheated leftover chili but didn't touch it. Outside, snow powdered the sidewalks like sugar. His street was quiet, a far cry from the polished world of downtown Chicago where silence could carry accusations sharper than words. At 3:20 p.m., he pulled up in front of Maya's school. She ran to the car in her puffy lavender coat, her backpack bouncing behind her. She climbed into the back seat and buckled in. "You didn't go to work today?" "Nope," Marcus said, smiling in the rearview mirror. "Had a day off." "You never get days off." "Well, maybe I should start." She studied him for a second. "You okay, Dad?" "I'm good, sweetheart. Let's go home." They drove in comfortable quiet. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a beat on his thigh. His mind kept circling back to the audio recording, to the note he'd left on Victoria's nightstand, to the look in her eyes when she couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge what happened. At home, Maya kicked off her boots and ran to the kitchen. "Can we finish decorating the gingerbread house?" Marcus forced a grin. Absolutely. They worked side by side at the table, icing sugar windows and lining up gumdrop lights. For an hour, the world narrowed to frosting and sprinkles and Maya's laughter. He needed that. It reminded him who he was, what he was anchored to. Not a job. Not someone else's opinion. His daughter. His promise. Later that night, once Maya was in bed and the dishes were done, Marcus sat on the couch with a cup of tea. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Marcus?" It was her. Victoria. He didn't speak right away. She sighed. "I wanted to say thank you, for what you did." "You don't remember it," he said flatly. "I remember parts. I remember being outside. I remember your coat. You stayed? Until I was sure you were okay. I found the note, and the water glass, and the heels neatly by the bed. That wasn't something someone does if they're trying to—" She stopped. "If they're trying to hurt you," Marcus finished. She swallowed hard. "I've made a mess." He let the silence stretch. "I never meant for HR to get involved," she said. I told them I didn't remember, and next thing I knew, the protocols kicked in. You could have stopped it." "I was scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of how it would look. A senior executive, drunk, taken home by a subordinate. Do you know how many women lose everything over assumptions? And how many black men lose everything over them?" Marcus shot back. Silence again, but this one hit harder. "I'm sorry," she said, voice low. Marcus stared at the floor. "It's not just about sorry, Victoria. I've worked here 6 years. Never missed a deadline. Always stayed late. Mentored interns. You know how many times I've had to outwork people to prove I belong." She didn't answer. "Now all it takes is one bad assumption and I'm on leave. I didn't ask for that. You didn't stop it either." "I know." There was something in her voice now, cracks. Real ones. Not the polished corporate veneer. He didn't know whether to feel vindicated or exhausted. "I heard the recording," he said. Her breath caught. "You said you weren't drunk. Just empty." She didn't deny it. "I saved it," he said, "but I haven't sent it to anyone." "Why not?" "Because I'm not like them. I don't need to burn someone down to lift myself up." She exhaled shakily. "I don't deserve your grace. I'm not giving you grace. I'm protecting my name." A beat passed. "Marcus, would you meet me tomorrow? Not at the office. Somewhere neutral. Just to talk." He paused. "Why?" "Because I owe you more than this." He thought for a moment. "There's a coffee shop off 18th and Prairie, South Side, 10 a.m. I'll be there." He hung up. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his coat. Maya sat at the kitchen table, swinging her feet and eating cereal. "You're going back to work?" "Number just meeting someone." "Someone important?" He considered that. "Maybe more than I thought." The cafe was small, locally owned, filled with worn wooden chairs and the smell of cinnamon and coffee beans. Old jazz played faintly from a record player in the corner, the kind of place where people stayed for hours and talked about life instead of business. Victoria arrived 5 minutes late. No heels today, flat boots, a wool coat, less makeup. She looked almost human. Marcus stood as she approached. "You're braver than I thought," he said. "I had to see you, not as your boss, just as me." They ordered. Saturday. The awkwardness was a third person at the table. "I've spent years building a wall," Victoria said. "I thought if I looked tough enough, worked hard enough, I'd be safe." Safe from what? From being seen as weak, from being overlooked, from becoming invisible. Marcus nodded slowly. "I get that. But I see now. The walls don't keep people out. They trap you inside." He didn't reply, just sipped his coffee. "I don't know how to undo what's been done, but I want to make it right." He looked up at her. "Then start by telling the truth." She nodded. "I will, to HR, to the board, to everyone who matters." Marcus leaned back. For the first time, her voice didn't sound like it was reading from a script. He didn't smile. But something inside him loosened. The silence between them wasn't gone, but it had shifted from suspicion to something closer to understanding. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. The following week brought a strange quiet. No emails from HR, no callbacks from IT, no new developments, just waiting. Marcus had returned to the rhythms of his day, making Maya's lunch in the morning, listening to her talk about school projects, jogging before dinner, but beneath it all was a tension that pulsed with every breath. On Thursday morning, he received a message that broke the silence. "Please come in Monday. We'll clarify everything. Jennifer, HR." He read it twice. No subject line, no details, just a summons. But the weight of it filled the kitchen like smoke. Maya looked up from her drawing. "You're going back to work?" "I think so." She smiled, toothy and proud. "Told you they'd realize you didn't do anything wrong." He kissed her forehead. Sometimes the truth takes a little while to catch up. Monday came, and Marcus stepped back into the firm's sleek glass building with the awareness of someone walking into a courtroom. The security guard greeted him by name, but without warmth. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the hush that followed was unmistakable. Some people looked away. Others didn't even glance up. Jennifer met him at the reception area and led him into the same small conference room as before. This time, she wasn't alone. Victoria was already seated, dressed conservatively, hair pulled back. A man in a gray suit, someone from the board, Marcus assumed, sat beside her. "Marcus," Jennifer began, "thank you for coming. We've had time to look into the matter more thoroughly." Marcus nodded. "I hope that means fairly." Victoria spoke next. "I asked for this meeting. I want to set the record straight." The man in gray folded his hands. "Miss Reynolds has submitted a formal statement correcting the narrative. She's explained that Mr. Williams acted appropriately at all times, and that her earlier concerns were due to confusion, not misconduct." Marcus didn't react. "Not yet. I also informed them," Victoria added, voice steady, "that I requested Mr. Williams' help, and that he ensured my safety in every possible way. I apologize for the delay in coming forward. That's on me." Jennifer cleared her throat. "With this, we're closing the internal review. You're welcome to resume work effective immediately." Marcus looked at each of them in turn. "I appreciate the clarity, but clarity doesn't undo what it cost." Victoria winced slightly but didn't argue. After the meeting, as he walked back to his desk, a few coworkers offered him quiet nods. Not quite apologies, not yet forgiveness, but something. He didn't sit. Instead, he turned and walked to the elevator, down to the lobby, out into the street. The cold bit harder now, but his steps were sure. He took the train down to Bronzeville, where Amanda's law office occupied the second floor above a laundromat. She looked up from her desk when he entered. "You're early." "It's done," Marcus said. "They cleared me." "Let me guess," she said dryly. "No apology, no formal admission of mishandling, just an invitation to return like nothing happened?" "Exactly." Amanda leaned back, arms crossed. "You want to sue?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I want to understand something first." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Why she froze. Amanda sighed. "Because power doesn't guarantee courage." Victoria's been climbing their ladder so long, she forgot what it means to risk falling. Marcus nodded slowly. "She said she wants to make it right. But words are easy." Amanda narrowed her eyes. "Then test them." That night, Marcus received a message from Victoria. It wasn't a text, it was a voice recording. I don't know why I'm sending this. Maybe because talking is easier than writing. I need you to understand, I wasn't scared of you. I was scared of the truth that being helped by you would force me to face. That I've spent years believing I had to be tougher than everyone else, especially the men, especially the black men, just to survive in this world. That night, you were kinder than I deserved, and I couldn't admit that without breaking the image I built. Her voice cracked near the end. Then, I'm sorry, for the silence, for the harm. I hope someday you'll believe I meant that. Marcus replayed the message twice. He didn't respond right away. Instead, the next day, he invited her to lunch. They met at a small diner near the edge of downtown checkered floor, red leather booths, the kind of place that had been there since the 60s. Marcus ordered coffee. Victoria sat across from him, hands clasped tightly. I listened to your message, he said. Thank you for that. I meant every word. He studied her. You said you've been climbing a ladder your whole life. What if there's another way to lead? She tilted her head. What do you mean? I mean, what if leadership isn't about being harder than everyone else? What if it's about being real? About standing up when the easy thing is to disappear? She looked down at her coffee. Then I've been doing it wrong for a long time. He leaned in. Then maybe this is your chance to start again. Victoria exhaled slowly. I've been thinking about stepping down. Marcus blinked. You don't have to. I know, but maybe I should. Not because I'm forced to, but because I need to make space for someone better. Someone who hasn't forgotten what it means to be human. The words surprised him. I'd like to start a mentorship program, she continued, for young women of color in corporate leadership. Give them the tools I didn't have, the support I never offered. Marcus smiled, small but genuine. That's a damn good idea. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, snow had started to fall again, soft and slow. Victoria looked up at him. You stayed with me that night. I didn't ask you to. Why? Marcus met her gaze. Because doing the right thing shouldn't need an invitation. And in that quiet booth, over coffee and truth, something began to shift, not just between them, but inside them both. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the kind of understanding that sets the foundation for something real. Maybe even something that could grow. In the weeks that followed, Marcus returned to work with his usual steady rhythm. But the atmosphere around him had changed. The stares were fewer now, the whispers faded, but something subtle remained, a sense that his presence, though welcomed back, still unsettled the surface of the firm's polished veneer. He didn't mind. He hadn't come back to be liked. He came back because his name mattered, and because Maya needed to see that her father didn't walk away when things got hard. Victoria kept her distance in public. They exchanged the occasional nod in the hallway or a brief, professional email. But Marcus noticed she'd started spending more time in meetings with the diversity team, showing up to mentorship panels, listening more than speaking. And she looked different, not in appearance, but in energy. Less guarded, less unreachable. Then, one Monday morning, an email hit the firm's internal network. It was a blind CC, no names, just a message from Anonymous, attached with screenshots and links. Marcus opened it without thinking, but as he read, his stomach dropped. The screenshots showed budget spreadsheets with flagged numbers, altered figures, and a string of internal memos. There was a pattern money being siphoned quietly through a shell contractor tied to someone in upper management. The email claimed the corruption had been going on for over a year, and that Victoria Reynolds had known. It exploded within hours. By lunch, the entire floor was buzzing. People whispered by the copy machines, texts flew beneath desks, and the head of compliance stormed into HR with a stack of printouts. Marcus stayed out of ITAT first. He didn't want to be dragged into anything that smelled like politics. But when Jennifer pulled him into a private room and shut the door, he knew that was wishful thinking. You were mentioned, she said quietly. In the email? Indirectly. The contractor used in the scheme, he's someone from your old neighborhood. Name's Darren Kilpatrick. You two went to high school together. Marcus leaned back, stunned. I haven't spoken to Darren in over a decade. I know, but someone's trying to tie you in. That's absurd. I agree, but perception matters more than reality right now. He stared at her. So what are you saying? Just, be careful. People are nervous. And when people are nervous, they look for easy explanations. Marcus left the room feeling as if someone had handed him a live wire. He went straight to the company archives and began digging through past vendor contracts. Darren's name was there. Small contracts at first office maintenance, document shredding, but over time, they grew, tens of thousands. Then more. The strange thing? All of them were signed off not by Victoria, but by Tom Chambers, vice president of operations. Marcus remembered Tom well, a man who smiled too hard and listened too little. That night, after Maya fell asleep, Marcus made a call. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Hello? It's me. We need to talk." A pause. "I figured you'd call. You saw the email?" "I did, and I know how it looks. Someone's trying to burn you," Marcus said, "but they're lighting the wrong match. I didn't approve those payments," she said quickly. "But I didn't stop them either, and that's on me." Marcus rubbed his temples. "How long have you known?" "Only a few weeks. I started noticing patterns, flagged it internally. I was going to report it, but what? I was scared they'd think I was covering it up. After what happened between us after the HR mess, I couldn't afford another storm. You kept quiet to protect yourself." To buy time," she said, "to figure out how to survive it." Marcus didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to fix this," she continued, "but you have every right to know you're being dragged into it by association. Tom's behind it," Marcus said. "Or at least, he signed the contracts. I can't prove it. Not yet. I can try." There was silence on the line. Then, "Why are you helping me?" "Because I don't like injustice," he said. "And because maybe, for once, someone has to stop being afraid." They met the next evening at Amanda's office. The civil rights attorney welcomed them both with raised eyebrows. "Well, this is a surprising pairing," Amanda said, sliding a folder toward Marcus. "These are the vendor audits you asked for. Every name, every invoice." Victoria glanced around the small office, the books stacked on the floor, the framed photos of protests and legal victories. "This is where the real work happens, isn't it?" Amanda smiled thinly. "Not as glossy as your boardrooms, but we get things done." They spent 3 hours cross-referencing invoices, identifying patterns, tracing digital fingerprints. Victoria was sharper than Marcus expected. Her mind cut through data like a scalpel. At one point, Marcus looked up. "You ever think about quitting?" "All the time," she said. "But then I remember if I leave, they win. They get to say, 'See, she couldn't handle it.' And if you stay, then maybe I show someone else they can too." They found their breakthrough in a hidden metadata trail-in email from Tom's assistant, approving a payment Darren never invoiced for. A smoking gun, if there ever was one. Amanda nodded slowly. "This is enough to take to the board. Maybe the SEC." Marcus turned to Victoria. "You ready?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It's time." When they walked out into the cold night air, the street lamps flickered above them, and the city exhaled around their quiet resolve. Victoria looked at Marcus. "Do you believe people can change?" "I believe people can choose to," he said. "And maybe that's enough." She smiled, tired but real. "Then let's choose right." And with that, they stepped into the dark not to hide, but to face what waited beyond the glass. 3 days later, the boardroom was packed. Victoria stood at the head of the long oak table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Beside her was Amanda, whose presence raised eyebrows. A civil rights attorney with no corporate badge didn't belong here, but Victoria had insisted. And Marcus, seated at the end of the row, not as a participant, but as a witness, watched everything with quiet intensity. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. "I requested this special session to bring forward information that has come to light, evidence of financial misconduct within our operations department, involving fraudulent contracts and manipulated vendor payments." The room rustled. Eyebrows lifted. A few exchanged looks. One of the older board members leaned back, skeptical. "I take full responsibility for not speaking up sooner," she continued. "I noticed irregularities weeks ago, but I hesitated out of fear of how it would be perceived, especially after recent events involving my conduct. That was a mistake, and I'm here today to correct it." Amanda stepped forward and placed a folder in front of each board member. Inside is a timeline, along with digital proof including emails and transaction logs showing how vendor Darren Kilpatrick was used as a shell to siphon money from internal budgets. The approval signatures? Mostly from Tom Chambers. The room's air tightened. Tom, seated midway down the table, shifted uncomfortably. "That's outrageous," Amanda calmly replied. "Mr. Chambers, your assistant sent an email authorizing payment for services never rendered. We verified timestamps and metadata. It's on record." Tom's face flushed. "I don't even remember that." "That may be," Victoria said, "but memory doesn't override accountability." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the CFO Elaine Whitmore closed her folder. "This is serious. We'll have to launch a formal inquiry. Legal will review every contract in the past 2 years." Tom scoffed. "So you're taking her word over mine?" "No," Elaine said. "We're taking the evidence's word." Victoria didn't flinch, but Marcus could see the tension in her jaw. The way her fingers curled subtly into her palms beneath the table. Amanda added, "We also ask that during the investigation, Mr. Chambers be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." A pause. Then a quiet murmur of agreement spread around the table. Tom stood sharply, chair scraping. "This is political. You're protecting her to save face." "No," Marcus said, finally speaking. His voice was calm, but strong. "We're protecting the company from rot." Tom's eyes flicked to Marcus. "Of course, the hero shows up." "No hero," Marcus replied. "Just someone who stayed long enough to see what you hoped no one would." Security was discreet. Tom didn't resist. But as he exited, the mood in the room shifted, less charged, more sobering. What had been unspoken was now undeniable. Afterward, Victoria stood outside the building's front steps, wind tugging at the hem of her coat. Marcus joined her, hands deep in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but I feel clear." "That's something." She looked at him. "You didn't have to come today." "I did, because truth without witnesses can be buried." They stood in silence for a while, watching taxis pass and clouds roll over the city skyline. "Do you know what this means?" she finally asked. "You're going to have enemies now." She nodded. "You too." Marcus shrugged. "Nothing new for me." She smiled faintly. "Still, thank you." They parted there, no dramatic goodbye, no promises, just a sense of something turning, a tide, a pattern undone. Back at home that evening, Marcus sat with Maya on the couch, her head resting against his arm. She was watching cartoons, unaware of the waves her father had helped start. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. You ever been scared to tell the truth?" He looked down at her. "All the time. But you still do it?" "I try." She nodded. "That's what brave people do, right?" He kissed her forehead. "That's what good people do." Later, after Maya was asleep, Marcus reopened the file Amanda had emailed him. It was a summary of Victoria's statement and the documents she submitted. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "The truth only changes the world when someone's brave enough to say it out loud." He stared at the line for a long time. The next day, he returned to work. The office was subdued. People whispered. But this time it wasn't about him. It was about the fall of Tom Chambers. About the revelation that the people who smiled at company picnics and posed for charity photos had been stealing from the same system they swore to uphold. Victoria wasn't at her desk. Word was she'd taken personal leave for a few days. In the meantime, the mentorship program she had hinted at was quietly launched. Initial invites, sent to junior staff from underrepresented backgrounds. Marcus was listed as one of the lead mentors. He read the email 3 times before smiling. Just a little. That evening, as the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, Marcus stood in front of the mirror. He didn't see a victim, or a pawn, or even a survivor. He saw a man who had chosen to stay, not because it was safe, but because the truth deserved company. It was Saturday morning, and the sun filtered softly through the blinds of Marcus's small apartment. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy. The house was quiet. Maya still asleep, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in one hand. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a half-finished crossword, the hum of the fridge the only background noise. He was just starting to think about breakfast when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "There's a community fundraiser at the Bronzeville Rec Center this afternoon. Thought you might like to come. Bring Maya. V. He read the message twice, surprised by the simplicity of it. No apology, no long explanation, just an invitation. And, for the first time since everything had unraveled, something unspoken between them felt normal. At noon, Marcus and Maya arrived at the center. The lot was packed. Families milled about outside, and the smell of grilled corn and barbecue floated in the air. Children darted between booths with painted faces and balloon animals. Inside, volunteers were setting up tables of donated coats, food baskets, and school supplies. Marcus spotted Victoria near the back, sleeves rolled up, helping unload boxes. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, no blazer, no heels. When she saw him, her face lit up with something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. "You came," she said, brushing dust from her hands. "You invited me," Marcus replied. She glanced down at Maya, who was already halfway to the art table with a group of other kids. "She's getting big. She's getting bold," he said with pride. Victoria motioned toward a folding table. "Want to help hand out gloves? We're low on volunteers." "Sure." For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side, sorting and distributing winter gear. Every now and then, someone from the neighborhood would come up to Marcus with a nod or a quiet thank you. Word had traveled. People knew what he had stood up against, even if it hadn't made the front page. As the afternoon stretched on, Marcus found himself laughing more than he expected. Victoria was different, here less guarded, more alive. She knelt to tie the shoelaces of a little boy with holes in his sneakers, then turned to hug an elderly woman who called her baby girl, like they were family. "You ever think," Marcus said quietly during a lull, "that maybe this kind of work is what changes things more than anything we do in those glass offices?" Victoria looked up at him, her hands still sorting through scarves. "Every day now," he nodded slowly. "Then why go back at all?" She hesitated, then stood. "Because I'm not done yet. I have to clean up the mess. And then, maybe I walk away on my own terms. Not because I was pushed out or because I broke, but because I chose a different fight." Marcus studied her. "You sure that fight won't break you too?" She met his gaze. "Not if I have the right people beside me." It wasn't flirtation, not exactly, but it wasn't just professional either. It was something quieter, deeper recognition of what they'd both endured, and what might be possible in the spaces between survival and purpose. Later, as the event wound down and volunteers began packing up, Victoria approached him again. "I was thinking," she said, "about setting up a scholarship for high schoolers from neighborhoods like ours. Something in your father's name." Marcus blinked. "My dad?" He raised a man who stayed when he didn't have to. "That's legacy, and I think we could honor it." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. The thought of his father, his quiet strength, his endless male roots, the dignity he carried through a world that didn't always see him, tightened something in his chest. "I'd be honored," he finally said. Victoria offered her hand. "Then let's build something better." He shook it, firm, steady. As they loaded the last of the bins into her trunk, Maya ran over, her face painted like a tiger. "Dad," Miss Victoria said, "we can come back next Saturday and help again." Marcus raised an eyebrow at Victoria. "That's so?" Victoria smiled. "I figured I'd make it a weekly thing." "Well," he said, "guess we're volunteers now." Maya cheered, and Victoria laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from somewhere real. It was the first time Marcus saw her not as a boss, not as a headline, but simply as a woman trying to fix what she could, starting with the world right in front of her. And in that parking lot, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the fading light of a winter afternoon, it became clear that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, neither of them would be walking it alone. The following week brought wind and bitter cold, the kind that scraped at the skin and made sidewalks shine with ice. Marcus adjusted Maya's scarf before walking her into school. She held his hand a little tighter than usual. "Will Miss Victoria be at the center again this weekend?" she asked. "I think so," Marcus replied. "Why?" "Because I like how she talks to people, like they're all important." He paused, surprised by how accurately Maya could see things most adults missed. "Yeah," he said. "She's learning how to be real." Maya smiled. "Like you." That evening, after dinner and homework, Marcus sat down at his laptop. An email from Amanda was waiting in his inbox, marked with a red flag. Subject: Need to talk, urgent update on Tom's case. Marcus called her right away. Tom's pushing back harder than we expected, Amanda said. He's hired a PR firm. There's a whisper campaign starting accusations that this whole thing was retaliation, that you and Victoria had a personal agenda. Marcus leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. He's flipping the narrative. Exactly. He's not denying the transactions anymore. Now he's saying Victoria used them as leverage, that she had a personal grudge and manipulated the audit process. That's garbage. It is, Amanda said. But truth doesn't always win on its own. He's leaking to blogs, hinting at a relationship between you and Victoria, that it was all part of a plan to take him down. Marcus's stomach dropped. Maya. She's not mentioned. Yet. But if this keeps escalating, nothing's off the table. Silence. Then Marcus said, We need to get ahead of it. 2 days later, Marcus and Victoria met again, this time not at the community center, but at Amanda's office. The room felt tighter, tenser than before. He's playing dirty, Victoria said, pacing, trying to turn this into something it's not. I know, Marcus said, but part of me isn't surprised. Tom never liked losing, especially to people who don't look like him. Amanda interjected. We have a choice. Go public with everything, names, files, the entire paper trail. Let it all out at once before he can spin it further. Or stay quiet and hope the board handles it internally. Marcus looked to Victoria. If we go public, they'll question everything, your record, your leadership, your past. She nodded slowly. I've spent years building walls to protect that image. And those same walls are now a prison. Amanda said, If we do this, we do it together. No leaks. One unified statement, with evidence and testimony. Marcus said, We lead with truth, not defense. Victoria took a deep breath. Then let's say it all. No more hiding. The next morning, a joint statement was posted online on LinkedIn, in local media, and sent to every employee in the firm. It read, We are speaking today, not out of vengeance, but responsibility. Our silence allowed misconduct to continue. Our fear allowed doubt to spread, but truth, no matter how uncomfortable, must live in the light. We stand together in exposing a pattern of fraud carried out under the name of efficiency and buried beneath politics. The full documentation is provided below. Judge us not by the mistakes we once made in silence, but by the courage to speak now. Accompanying the statement were screenshots, audit reports, metadata logs, and transcripts of internal communications, all carefully organized by Amanda and her team. Within hours, the internet exploded. Some applauded, others questioned motives, but no one could ignore the weight of what had been exposed. And crucially, no one could deny the evidence. Back at the firm, the reaction was swift. The board issued a formal investigation. Employees began speaking up. Quiet voices who had felt bullied or dismissed by Tom over the years now came forward with their stories. The culture was cracking open, but not everyone was pleased. Anonymous emails appeared. Online posts mocking Marcus and Victoria's integrity. One even included a photo of them from the community fundraiser, shared with a cruel caption, Heroes or headlines. When Victoria saw it, she looked tired but resolute. He wants to make our decency look like strategy. Marcus replied, Let him try. Truth isn't strategy, it's survival. They stood side by side at the community center again that Saturday, but the energy was different. More people came, more volunteers. Even local news showed up with cameras, asking for a soundbite. Victoria politely declined, but Marcus stepped forward, looked into the lens, and said, This isn't about image, it's about community. When people stop hiding behind titles and start serving with their hands, that's when the real work begins. That clip made the evening news. A quiet man with a calm voice, holding gloves and speaking about justice, without slogans or theatrics. Later that night, Victoria sent him a message. You have no idea how much that mattered. He replied. I didn't do it for them. I did it for Maya, so she sees that truth doesn't bow. And beneath that exchange, beneath all the chaos, a new thread began to form. Not one of rescue or romance, but of respect earned the hard way through fire, through fear, through finally speaking when silence would have been easier. In the city that rarely slept, two people had chosen a different kind of mourning, one where names weren't whispered, but spoken aloud with all their weight, all their history, and all their hope. Marcus hadn't planned to visit the South Side that day, but something in his chest nudged him toward his father's old street. The block hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same metal fences rusting at the corners. The corner store still had the faded sign his father once pointed to, saying, "Never trust a place that sells milk and motor oil in the same aisle." He pulled up and sat in the car for a while, letting the memories rise. He could almost see his younger self walking home from school, backpack too heavy, eyes already tired from trying to be the kind of student that wouldn't get written off. He stepped out and walked the few feet to the front stoop of what used to be their home. The house now had a different coat of paint, someone else's wreath on the door, but the steps still creaked the same way. As he stood there, his phone rang. "Hey." Victoria's voice came through, slightly breathless. "I just got out of a meeting with the board. They're requesting an emergency shareholders meeting. They want to vote on whether to remove Tom completely." Marcus didn't move. "You think they'll do it?" Half of them were silent. "That scares me more than anger would have." Silence. "Where are you?" she asked. "My dad's old block." "Oh." He used to tell me, "Your name is the only thing they can't repossess. Keep it clean, even when they throw dirt." "I wish I'd met him," Victoria said quietly. "You've met parts of him, in the way I show up." She didn't respond right away. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm unraveling in ways I didn't expect, but maybe that's the point." He smiled faintly. "Unraveling isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it means you're making room for something better." Later that evening, Marcus picked up Maya from his sister's place and headed home. Maya chattered about her day, oblivious to the storm still swirling through the adult world. She had a new drawing: a woman in a cape standing beside a little girl and a man with a smile. "Who's this?" Marcus asked, pointing to the woman. "That's Miss Victoria. She's helping people now. She's a hero." "And me? You're her sidekick," she laughed. He grinned. "I'll take that." At home, while Maya watched her Saturday cartoons, Marcus opened his email. A message from HR blinked at the top of the screen. Subject: Invitation to speak at upcoming Equity Summit. The company was hosting a summit on workplace equity and transparency, a move likely prompted by the recent scandal. They wanted Marcus to be a keynote speaker, to share his experience and perspective. He stared at the email for a long while. Part of him felt like it was too little, too late. Another part of him knew this was a chance to say something that might resonate beyond one building. He clicked accept. The night before the summit, Victoria called again. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "For what?" "They want me to sit on the panel. First time back in the spotlight since the statement. You're not the same person who used to hide behind spreadsheets." "I know," she whispered, "but it's easier to hide." Marcus said, "Then don't hide. Speak like no one's watching, but make sure everyone hears you." The next day, the auditorium was packed. Executives, staffers, interns. Cameras streamed it live. Marcus sat near the front, Maya beside him, swinging her legs and holding a juice box. Victoria stepped onto the stage. She wore black slacks and a soft gray blouse. No power suit, no forced smile. Just herself. She took a breath. "For a long time, I believed strength meant silence. That leadership meant hiding your doubts, your fears, your mistakes. But I was wrong. Real strength is admitting when you've been part of the problem and choosing to be part of the solution." She looked out over the crowd. "I failed to speak up, and people got hurt. But I'm here today not as a model of perfection, but as proof that change is possible when we stop pretending we're untouchable." There was a beat of quiet, then applause, steady, real. Marcus stepped up next. He didn't use notes. "My father used to say that every man carries his name like a mirror. How you act reflects what people see. I almost lost my name. I almost let a lie define me." He looked toward the audience. "But truth has a sound. It's not loud, it's not always elegant, but it resonates. When you hear it, you know. And when you speak it, people around you remember how to stand again." The applause this time rose higher. After the summit, Victoria approached him backstage. "You were incredible," she said. "You too." She touched his arm lightly. "Thank you. For staying. For standing." He looked into her eyes. "We're just getting started." That night, After Maya was in bed and the city was quiet again, Marcus stood at his window. Snow was falling, soft, slow, and somewhere beneath that blanket of white, the echoes of the past were giving way to a future still unwritten but finally, undeniably, theirs to shape. March arrived with a sudden warmth that melted the last of the snow off the sidewalks. For the first time in months, Marcus left the house without a coat. The air smelled like thawing earth and renewal. Back at the firm, a shift had begun to settle in. Tom Chambers was no longer on the premises. His name had been scrubbed from emails. His office door now bore a generic Operations Director TBD sign. New policies rolled out: whistleblower protections, transparency task forces, regular equity reviews. It was a start. Marcus didn't trust it completely, but he welcomed the motion forward. On a Thursday afternoon, Victoria returned from her personal Levenot to her old office, but to a shared workroom on the 10th floor, near the community engagement team. She no longer wore her title like armor. She wore jeans, rolled sleeves, and a tired smile that suggested she'd left something behind and maybe picked up something better. They met for lunch in the small cafe downstairs. "I walked past the glass hallway today," she said, stirring her tea. "And it hit me. I used to think those offices were the finish line. Now they just look like cages." Marcus smiled. "Funny how clarity shows up after the storm." "I'm launching the scholarship," she continued. "We've got 2 sponsors already. I want to name it after your dad if you're still okay with that." He nodded slowly. He'd be honored. "I'll tell Maya tonight. She's been drawing logos for it." Victoria laughed gently. "Of course she has." A pause lingered between them, the kind that carried weight but didn't press. "Do you regret staying?" she asked softly. "No," Marcus replied. "But I regret the silence. I let myself believe I didn't have the power to push back, and that belief almost let them erase me." Victoria's eyes dropped to her hands. "I lived in that silence too long. I let it shape me." "Then it's a good thing you found your voice," he said. "You changed more than you realize." The next weekend, the community center held a naming ceremony for the new scholarship, the Leonard Williams Future Leaders Fund. The room was packed: students, parents, former colleagues of Marcus's father, even some board members from the firm. Maya stood proudly at the podium, holding a framed drawing of her grandfather. "This is my grandpa Leonard," she said into the microphone. "He wasn't famous, but he was kind, and he always helped people who didn't ask for help. My dad says that's called doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That's why this scholarship is named for him." The crowd applauded warmly. Victoria took the stage next. "Today, we plant something that will grow long after we're gone. That's what leadership should be: not ego or titles, but seeds, quiet, patient seeds." After the event, as the crowd thinned, Marcus and Victoria sat on the edge of the stage, legs dangling like they were kids again. "You know," she said, "I thought I had to be invincible to survive, but it turns out I just had to be willing to be seen." He turned to her. "Being seen is harder than being admired. I used to crave admiration," she admitted. "Now, I want to be useful. You are." They sat in silence, watching Maya play tag with some other kids by the rec room doors. Her laughter echoed through the space like music. Victoria looked down at her hands. "There's something else I've been thinking about." "Yeah? I'm not staying at the firm much longer. I haven't announced it yet, but my chapter there is ending. I've outgrown it. Or maybe I finally see it for what it really was." Marcus wasn't surprised. He nodded. "You know where you're going next?" She looked up. "Not exactly, but I know what kind of work I want to do. The kind that doesn't require business cards or corner offices." He smiled. "That's the best kind." "And you?" she asked. "You staying?" "For now," Marcus said. "But I'm not done dreaming either. I want Maya to see what it means to build something slow and honest. I want her to know that roots matter more than branches." Victoria reached over and gently touched his hand. "Then maybe we build something, together. Not because we have to, but because we choose to." He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. The look between them said enough. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, Marcus walked home with Maya, her hand in his. "Daddy," she said, "do you think I'll ever be brave like you?" He looked down, heart full. "You already are, baby. Every time you tell the truth, Every time you're kind. Every time you keep going when it's hard, you're brave. She smiled and skipped ahead, her joy lighting the sidewalk like street lamps. And in the quiet that followed, Marcus understood that change didn't come with headlines or speeches. It came with choosing, again and again, to stand when it would be easier to sit, to speak when silence offered safety, to hope when history whispered otherwise. That was the long game, and for the first time, he wasn't playing it alone. Spring pushed its way fully into the city, unfolding buds along the sidewalks and coaxing sunlight through the glass towers downtown. Marcus sat across from Victoria at a small diner tucked between a laundromat and a discount pharmacia place neither of them would have chosen months ago, but now felt just right. No pretense, no mirrors. They ordered coffee, eggs, toast. Maya was at school, and for the first time in days, neither of them was rushing between meetings or dealing with emails. Victoria stirred her coffee absently. I submitted my resignation yesterday. Marcus looked up, eyebrow raised. You didn't tell me. I needed to do it without anyone watching, without approval. He nodded slowly. How did it feel? Like setting down a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. The waitress slid their plates onto the table, offering a warm smile that neither of them returned immediately. They were still caught in the gravity of what had just been said. Victoria took a bite, then set her fork down. There was a time I thought that title defined me, vice president. It sounded like safety, like worth. But now, it just feels like something I had to wear because I didn't believe my name was enough. Marcus didn't respond right away. He let her words breathe. Then he said, You're more than a title. You always were. You just finally let yourself believe it. A pause passed between them, full, not empty. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know what scares me the most about leaving? He waited. That I might never feel necessary again. Marcus reached for his coffee, thoughtful. You were necessary when you helped that kid find winter boots at the center. When you listened to someone without interrupting. When you admitted your failure out loud so someone else might not repeat it. You think that kind of necessity only lives in boardrooms? She blinked slowly, eyes wet. Number, I just needed to hear it. The bell above the diner door jingled and in walked a young woman in a staff polo from the community center. She spotted Marcus and waved. Mr. Williams, I meant to tell you one of the kids from your Saturday group just got accepted into the City Arts program. Full scholarship. Said it was your speech that made him apply. Marcus smiled, humbled. Thanks for telling me. As she left, Victoria stared at him. You realize what that means, don't you? He nodded. That the real work is slow, and quiet, and permanent, she added. They finished breakfast in silence. When they stepped out into the sunlight, Victoria said, I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something small, focused on mentorship, legal aid, education, something rooted, not flashy. Marcus smiled. Sounds like the kind of thing Maya would want to design a logo for. Victoria laughed. Then it's already got soul. They began walking. The city was alive with the hum of people choosing again and again to move forward. It reminded Marcus of something his father once said. The world doesn't change with noise. It changes with footsteps. One honest step at a time. As they reached the corner, Marcus's phone rang. Amanda. He answered. Hey, just a heads up, Amanda said, her tone cautious. Tom's lawyers just filed a defamation suit. He's going after both of you. Marcus didn't flinch. Expected it. He's disparity. But it means you'll have to testify. Both of you. It's going to get personal. Marcus glanced at Victoria, who could tell immediately something had shifted. He nodded to her. We'll be ready, he said. Let him come. After he hung up, Victoria asked, That bad? He's suing. She exhaled. Of course he is. You okay? I will be. They kept walking, neither quickening their pace. No panic, no retreat, just forward. By the time they reached the center, Maya was already inside, sorting books with other kids. She looked up and waved when she saw them. Miss Victoria, she called. I saved you a spot for painting. Victoria smiled and hurried over. Marcus watched her crouch beside Maya, helping her squeeze paint onto a small paper plate. They looked like family not by blood, but by choice. By shared truth. Amanda called again that evening. I'll represent you both, she said. Pro bono. You don't have to. I want to, Amanda interrupted. Because what you're doing, it matters. And people like Tom don't get to rewrite the story just because they lost control of the pen. Marcus felt something unshakable settle in his chest. Thank you. That night, he stood on his small balcony, the city glowing around him, the sounds of traffic humming like distant waves. Victoria joined him, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. We'll fight him, she said, and we'll win. Not because we want to be right, but because we already are. He took the mug from her, their fingers brushing. It's never been about revenge. No, she agreed. It's always been about the next chapter. They stood there a long while, side by side in the quiet. The story wasn't over. The storm wasn't done. But neither were they. The courtroom was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Walls beige and bare, lights too bright. The kind of place designed to strip away distractions and emotion, yet filled with both. Marcus sat beside Victoria at the long defense table, Amanda between them like a pillar. Tom Chambers sat across the aisle with his legal team, chin lifted high, smug even now. Cameras weren't allowed, but journalists lined the gallery. Everyone wanted a piece of the narrative, the corporate betrayal, the whistleblower fallout, the story of 2 unlikely voices standing against a man who had once represented power. Marcus leaned toward Victoria. How's your pulse? She gave a tight smile. Louder than the judge's gavel. Good. Means you're alive. Amanda rose to begin their defense. Calm, collected, razor sharp. Your Honor, she said. What Mr. Chambers wants is not justice. What he seeks is erasure of accountability, of truth, and of the people who dared speak it. He is not a victim of defamation. He is a symptom of unchecked power. She submitted the full chain of audit documents, the internal memos, and testimony from 4 former employees who had come forward in the weeks leading up to the hearing. Quiet voices, emboldened by Victoria's courage and Marcus's resolve. When it was Marcus's turn to testify, he took a steady breath and walked to the stand. Mr. Williams, the judge began, can you explain what motivated you to get involved in exposing Mr. Chambers' misconduct? Marcus met the judge's eyes. At first, I didn't want to. I was scared. I'd be labeled angry or difficult. Scared for my daughter, scared for my job, but then I remembered what my father used to say. If the truth makes them uncomfortable, it means they needed to hear it. And I saw the truth. I couldn't pretend I didn't. And did you benefit personally from the exposure? He shook his head. In fact, I lost a lot. Time with my child. Peace. But I'd do it again, because silence wasn't safer. It was just slower poison. Victoria's testimony followed. Her voice wavered at first, but she found her rhythm quickly. I was complicit in a culture of silence, she admitted. For years, I climbed ladders built by people like Tom. I thought if I didn't rock the boat, I'd be allowed to stay. But staying quiet didn't protect me. It only delayed the inevitable that power without integrity will always devour itself. Tom's lawyer tried to paint them as colluding, as exaggerating, as attention-seeking, but nothing stuck. Every denial Tom gave only contradicted previous emails. Every deflection was answered by calm, precise rebuttals. The final day of testimony arrived, and with it, the closing remarks. Amanda stood. This isn't just about one man and one company. This is about every workplace that tells its people to sit down when they stand for what's right. Mr. Williams and Miss Reynolds didn't just expose a fraud, they exposed the cost of decency in a system that often punishes it. I ask the court to recognize that not as betrayal, but as bravery. The judge took 2 days to deliver the decision. When the call came, Marcus was at home, cooking dinner. Maya was at the table coloring. He answered on speaker. The court finds in favor of the defendants, the voice said. All claims of defamation dismissed. Mr. Chambers is further advised that retaliatory legal action against protected whistleblower testimony may be subject to investigation. Victoria's voice echoed through the line. We won? We did, Amanda confirmed. You're free. Marcus turned to Maya, who was watching him closely. We won, baby. She grinned, not fully understanding, but knowing enough to leap into his arms. That weekend, the community center held a celebration. Not formal, not flashy, just neighbors, mentors, and volunteers gathering for barbecue and music and laughter. Marcus gave a short speech, but the real spotlight belonged to the teens who shared how the scholarship had already changed their goals. Victoria arrived late, wearing jeans and sneakers, hair tied back, a small smile on her face. "You look different," Marcus said. "I feel different." He handed her a plate of food. "Think you'll miss the corporate world?" "Not a bit." They found a quiet spot under a tree, while Maya ran with other kids nearby. "So," Victoria asked, "what's next for you?" He shrugged. "Keep mentoring. Maybe teach. Write something. Whatever helps people grow stronger, without having to lose so much first." She nodded. "I'm starting the foundation next month. We'll need board members." "You asking?" "I'm hoping." He smiled. "Then count me in." They sat in companionable silence as dusk fell around them. Fireflies began to dance. Somewhere nearby, a small speaker played Otis Redding, and someone started singing along, off-key but joyful. Victoria reached over and took his hand. No words, just presence. Because in the end, it wasn't about lawsuits or titles. It wasn't even about victory. It was about choosing the truth, again and again, no matter the cost. And for Marcus, for Victoria, and for Mayate, was about making sure the next chapter wasn't built on silence, but on something stronger, something permanent, something honest, something earned. The story reminds us that true courage lies not in grand gestures, but in the quiet decisions to stand up for what's right, especially when it's inconvenient or risky. It shows that integrity, once chosen, can ripple outward and change not just a single life, but a whole community. Marcus and Victoria's journey teaches us that titles fade, but character endures, and that justice begins with the willingness to speak the truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath us.